Now I would like to invite our long-standing partner at an forum, Christian Lutz. And Christian heads a consultancy which does structural research for the German economy primarily. And it's based in Osnabrück. Christian, the floor is yours.
I think it fits, it nicely fits to what we just heard from Ajay and Rosella. I have to say it's still ongoing work in progress, so that I don't have all the results already, but there are still quite a few questions and issues open. When I got the invitation for the conference, I thought, well, that's a really relevant issue to think about the problems of forecasting all these developments. And that's why before really going into giving some information about one of the projects we do for the German government, for the Federal Ministry of Economic Affairs and Energy, I'd like to raise a few issues I think that are really kind of challenges and what we've also seen in the presentations before. I think one issue is that we now have seen or heard also in Glasgow a lot of ambitious long-term mitigation targets now from, I think, almost all major emitting countries, at least for the long term. We have Germany now with a national target to be climate neutral in 2045, the EU and US in 2050, China and Russia in 2060, and India announced to become climate neutral in 2070. And we also have seen, let's say in the last year, a lot of also ambitious shorter term targets, new NDCs updated for 2030. For the EU, for example, minus 55% greenhouse gas emission reduction against 25. For the US, 50 to 52% against 2005, and also for other countries. And as we've seen in the presentations before, we're still quite uncertain what that means. It's on the one hand, at least these shorter term NDCs are still far from reaching the 1.5 degree target, or probably also even the 2 degree targets. That will mean, so if we want to still reach the Paris agreement and the emission pathway necessary to keep global temperature increase to below 1.5 degree, then we'll need an unprecedented change. And I guess one problem is that what we often see in energy system modeling is that, in a sense, they show us, well, that's possible, but of course they also assume optimal technological change happening. But what we can then see in the real world is, and when we ask why was the development maybe more slowly in the past, then we see, okay, there are various barriers and delays in real world economies. That's difficult to keep in mind. We also need to be aware that climate policy is not only, let's say, energy policy, but it also has to do with industrial policy, with trade aspects, with foreign policy. I mean, there's a good reason why the US, for example, now has John Kerry as special climate envoy, because they also see this as a more comprehensive policy. So climate policy is just part of a more comprehensive policy. And in that, countries, that's at least a German issue or perspective. It's important to look from a technology point of view. How can the country be positioned well in this race, let's say, to low emissions? And as we also heard, of course, these measures as carbon prices and others will induce a lot of structural change and behavioral change, and of course also technological change. And all that happens with high uncertainty about the future. I mean, it's obvious that no one knows whether we will go for a 1.5 degree world or for a 2.5 or even 3 degree increase, and what that means. And it depends on all the countries, and we're not sure what other countries will do, whether they will really keep or reach their pledges or not. So that's difficult, and that's of course then why we can use different scenarios to map and in a sense understand possible futures, including economic and technological changes that may happen. So that's in a sense about the challenges. The background for our project is what could be seen in the International Energy Agency, in its International Energy Agency's recent World Economy Outlook, when they talked about the potential new emerging energy economy, which could reach a market of $1,200 billion in the net zero emission scenario in 2050. And as you can see in the figure 1.3 to the right, that the market share could already reach almost $900 billion in 2030, if that happens. And then you can also see that it will be mainly batteries that will play a major role, but also wind energy, solar PV, electrolysers for production of hydrogen, and also fuel cells could play a major role. But of course, that's in the scenario on the right. In the scenario to the left, you can see that these markets will be much, much smaller if climate policy will be less ambitious in many countries in the world. And that's what we look at in our funded project, what is called low carbon leakage, which will still go until 2023. And we are mainly interested in the question. So of course, a first big issue for the EU is if we go ahead, if we are first mover in climate policy, then maybe our carbon intensive industries could be relocated to other parts of the world. So how could that be prevented? What are the pros and cons of a first mover strategy, as the European Union at least wants to have? And then also to have a better understanding and modeling of global low carbon value chains. So the big question is, where will the new goods be produced? So all these batteries, these electrolysers, these PV modules, and so on. So we're interested in a sense in the socio-economic impacts. And also now that's one of the major challenges we have at the moment. How can these technologies really be quantified? Because I've just listed to the right 14 technologies we are interested in the project. And when you look at statistics, unfortunately, you don't really find all of them. So where are the battery statistic? Where is the heat storage? Where are the heat pumps? That's quite difficult, because in a sense the old statistics are still in a sense showing the economic structures of the fossil economy. And thanks to Ajay, I don't have to say much about this slide. We use a macroeconometric model, so quite close to the E3ME model from Cambridge Econometrics that has been used in their study. We built on harmonized OECD input-output tables. You can see to the right a flow diagram of the different relations in the model. We also use explicit carbon prices as a proxy, I'd say, for different climate policies. And I think that's that's all I'd like to say for the moment. For that, and then the difficulty in this kind of data and this type of models is that where to find and how to quantify the investment for these new goods, and how to quantify the production of these new goods. Because if you look at, for example, an input-output table, either from the OECD or national ones, you don't find the wind mills, you don't find the PV cells, you don't find the e-mobility, or it's difficult to trace that. That's a difficult question. Also, the point whether goods are produced at home or whether they are produced in other countries. We know from PV, a lot of the modules is coming from China. But of course, if we install PV in Germany, for example, then of course still part of the investment or of the value added stays in Germany. And we have some information on these on a few renewable energy technologies already from a study from colleagues that are shown here. And these previous studies estimated the employment linked to renewable energy in Germany. That's something we can also use for this international model. And even more, some more modeling. I will not go into all details, but I think the red part, that's what we are at the moment quite interested in. Try to find explanations for how let's say the global production and trade patterns for these new technologies could develop. So where will the batteries be produced? Who will produce the electrolysers for the hydrogen production? And we think that to the right, there are different influencing parameters that we will test and try to find empirical relations. So is it, for example, the production costs that are important? I've heard in recent other publications or presentations about the so-called sweet spots of this new economy, where you have really low costs for electricity production from renewable energy. So if you have a lot of sun, for example, or hydro energy or whatever, it's quite cheap, then you can also produce other aspects. Maybe it's the competitiveness of comparable technologies that is important. Maybe it's the policy. I think that's what policymakers hope, that support research and development infrastructure that could keep or bring the new industries to the country. Maybe it also has to do with the distance to final demand. So does it make sense to produce, for example, a windmill in Germany and then export it to, let's say, Latin America? Or is it better to produce it somewhere there? Is the size of the home market something that is important? It probably is. Do we have kind of past dependencies? If we look at Denmark, for example, they started early with the wind industry, and they still have a large company that is exporting windmills to many parts of the world, and so on. So these are a few of the questions we're still trying to figure out and to make estimates. And well, I think it's quite difficult, because it's in the first place, it's already difficult to find the data for that analysis, and then to link and combine it for the modeling. But we already made some created some first results. I'd just like to briefly present here. where we have two different scenarios from another project. One is a reference scenario without additional policy efforts, not only in the EU but in the world. This is both are quite simple scenarios. In this 2-degree scenario, we simply put a single carbon price for all countries in the world, and additionally had a higher carbon price in the EU that can reach its targets for 2030 and 2050 to become climate neutral there. And then did that for our original modeling, and then already implemented parts of this new approach for windmills and PV, where we already have the data available. And there you can see that there are some differences for the period up to 2030 between the two scenarios. And actually, Ajay said that we have a macroeconometric model that is applied, and in these type of models, often the additional investment drives the GDP impacts. So there's some increase of GDP due to the higher climate ambition, and it's even higher due to the new approach. So when we explicitly model the new technologies, the GDP impacts will even be higher. But as I said, this is work in progress, and we are still collecting some data and thinking about the exact approach of how to combine these data. So that's nothing that will be published next week for sure. So just to summarize and give a brief outlook, what we try to do is to integrate the value chains of 14 different clean energy technologies in a global model with input, output, and bilateral trade, energy and emissions, so all that linked and combined. Then we want to explain shifts in production and trade flows, especially of these clean energy technology goods. So how will the trade pattern change? What can be quantified? How can that be quantified? And we will also have a look in the project at what is the role, or will be the role, could be the role of policies and transition speed and other country-specific factors. Because in a sense, for policy, it's of course important to understand whether they can influence and how they can influence these processes. And project partners from another institute, ICES, will provide some socio-technical assessments based on regime and landscape analysis for leading producer countries. So what could bring Germany, China, Japan, US, or other countries bring to lead for some technologies, and what could be other aspects that will prevent these kind of leading the technological progress. Then we try to incorporate all this information into scenarios and use it for modeling, and we'll finally surely quantify the impacts of ambitious mitigation targets under the new approach, and then we'll give some recommendations for policy, what they could do to foster their development. I mean, when we come back to the batteries, for example, or to the electric cars, it's in a sense that the question of where will the new plants for e-mobility for electric cars be in the future. So will they be in what we see, for example, now in Germany, a new Tesla plant that will start production, I think maybe next month or early next year. So who will be and where will these different technologies be produced? As I said at the beginning, this is all difficult, highly uncertain, but on the other hand, I think that's what makes it really interesting, and to better understand how these developments are driven. That's it for the moment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Christian. It is already clear that you are addressing here a task of great ambition, and we will be looking forward to your findings. And I hope we'll be able to hear more from you during the Q&A session. Thank you so much. It's been very interesting. Question, I guess, comes over there from Andrei Kolpakov. My question goes to Christian Lutz. Christian, this one is about German automotive industry. Now, it is sometimes said that producing an EV is technologically easier than producing an internal combustion engine car. And well, your country obviously is renowned around the world for great ICE cars. How do German car manufacturers feel now? Are they afraid of losing competitiveness in the future, particularly in a competitive struggle with China or potentially other countries? Because EVs are considered easier to make. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I think they are at least some of the companies, indeed, like Volkswagen, they are a bit afraid actually at the moment about Tesla. But all the German car manufacturers have strong programs to shift their production towards electric vehicles. Volkswagen will build, they just announced to build a completely new plant close to Wolfsburg, to their central production plant for building a new electric car. And also BMW and Daimler have strong plans to shift their production. And in a sense, as most of, or at least, yes, most of these companies sell, let's say, high value cars, it's easier for them to make this shift towards electric cars. If you can sell a car for 100 or 120,000 either US dollars or euros, or maybe even more, then it's not that important about what's the price of the batteries or of the engine. So I think in a sense, there has been, the car companies have been a bit reluctant like 2 or 3 years ago, but this changed a lot. And I think at the moment now, the German car industry is more looking to compete with the most advanced companies regarding electric car, being it in the US or in China. Thank you.
Professor Kuzovkin. I have a question for Christian Lutz. Sir, for 2030, 2050, what do you think should be the optimal share or the optimal contribution to total output of electricity by solar power plants and wind power plants? And are decommissioning costs taken into account as well or not? Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question. I mean, that's in a sense difficult to say when I talk from a German perspective, because some technologies have been phased out or forbidden by policy. So we do not talk about nuclear energy, for example, at the moment in Germany. We will close down the last 3 power plants at the end of next year, and I don't see any important party in parliament that want to, for example, rebuild nuclear. So in a sense, we're strongly focus on PV and wind. And in a sense, it's difficult. It's not only the technology, the costs of the technologies themselves that are important, but the question how well we can store the electricity for not only for short periods, but also for longer periods. And I think there's still high uncertainty about how these technologies, I mean, we're quite aware how we can build windmills and how we can build PV modules, but these questions are difficult to answer. So I think it is extremely difficult to see how this could be in a sense of an optimal. I think we should try to look for ways and transformation pathways that are not too costly, but in a sense, it's really difficult to exactly say what is the optimal or best pathway. So in a sense, I cannot fully answer the question, but I think that's the problems we are facing. Thank you.
Спасибо.